This book is the record of a 7-year study of living. The aim of the record was to find out what kinds of experience made me happy. The method was A. To pick out those moments in my daily life which had been particularly happy and try to record them in words. B. To go over these records in order to see whether I could discover any rules about the conditions in which happiness occurred. The form of the book follows from the nature of the experiment. I have tried to show the development of the problem by giving actual extracts from my diaries. I have tried always to keep to the facts as I saw them in order to show how I gradually pieced together the hints and clues which led to my final conclusions. The reason for writing the book was not the same as the reason for publishing it. It was written in the spirit of a detective who, baffled by the multitude of his facts, goes over and makes a summary of the progress of his investigations in the hope of finding something he has missed. So when I began to write this book in the 4th year of my enterprise, I did not know, or could only perceive very dimly, what the end would be. In this sense, the book is a contemporary journal of an exploration which involved doubts, delays, and expeditions on false trails, and the writing of it was an essential part of the search. The reason for publishing the book is that although what I found is probably peculiar to my own temperament and circumstances, I think the method by which I found it may be useful to others, even those whose discoveries about themselves may be the opposite of my own. The need for such a method in these days is obvious. A method for discovering one's true likes and dislikes, for finding and setting up a standard of values that is truly one's own, and not a borrowed, mass-produced ideal. But although others besides myself may perhaps find the method useful, this book is in no sense a treatise on how to be happy. It is only as true a record as I could make it of when I myself found when I asked, "What do I like?" It does not say, "You must do this." It only tries to give one answer to the question, "What happens if you do this?" And since what did happen was a great surprise to me, I have no doubt that there will be others to whom the experiences described will also be remote and unfamiliar. For psychologists tell us that there are fundamental differences in temperament, the extreme of each kind completely misunderstanding and often despising its opposite. It also seems to be true that one can assume and strive after a false attitude, that is, an attitude contrary to the trend of one's nature. So there may perhaps be some who, if tempted to try the same experiment, may discover as I did myself that they are quite different creatures from what they had imagined. Although there is this inevitable personal bias in my discoveries, there are some which I believe may apply universally. For instance, I discovered that there is all the difference in the world between knowing something intellectually and knowing it as a lived experience. This is a truism, but nonetheless of vital importance. The more I read scientific books on psychology, the more I felt that the essential facts of experience were being missed out. In order to show how far it is possible to handle ideas with apparent competence and yet be utterly at sea in trying to live one's knowledge, I would like the reader to bear in mind, when reading the first few chapters, that I had a first-class honors degree in psychology, and was also, during the time of this experiment, earning my living by applying my so-called psychological knowledge to others, in lecturing, research, and other ways. Actually, it was the uneasy suspicion of this gap between knowing and living that determined the first steps in the developing of my method. Remembering Descartes, I set out to doubt everything I had been taught. But I did not try to rebuild my knowledge in a structure of logic and argument. I tried to learn, not from reason, but from my senses. But as soon as I began to study my perception, to look at my own experience, I found that there were different ways of perceiving, and that the different ways provided me with different facts. There was a narrow focus which meant seeing life as if from blinkers, and with the center of awareness in my head, and there was a wide focus which meant knowing with the whole of my body, a way of looking which quite altered my perception of whatever I saw.